Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of the series of videos where I am building a CI/CD pipeline to deploy a Django application to Amazon ECS via GitHub Actions. In the last video, we dockerized a Django application and ran it on our local and hit the health check endpoint to see that it was giving us the correct response that we wanted. Now in this video we are going to set up our AWS so that we can push our Docker image to ECR and deploy it on ECS manually. And it is very crucial that we get the AWS setup right, because if we mess it up, most likely the image won't be deployed on ECS. So please watch the video till the end very carefully. If you get AWS setup right, it means 90% of your work is done, and it will be very easy for you to follow part 3 and complete the CI/CD pipeline. So let's dive right in. Since we are going to deploy our Docker container image to a remote host, we need to make a slight change so that Django allows a remote host to host this application. So basically we are just going to mark a wildcard symbol here, and this is important because all the deployments that will be done will be assigned a public IP that will be random, and that's why we don't know what will be the IP of the host where our Docker container will be running, right? So we have to put a wildcard here. Now you have to understand, if you are a little familiar, we can have a static IP using load balancers in ECS, but that is out of scope of this video, so we are not going to do that. Okay, so the next step is to create a Amazon ECR. If you want to know what it is, let's read it here. ECR is a fully managed container registry that makes it easy to store, manage, share and deploy your container images and artifacts anywhere, right? That means ECR will allow us to push our Docker container image from local to its repo, and the ECS will be pulling the container image from the ECR to deploy it. So let's click on create. We have to name it something. We are going to name it hello doc, which is our app's name, right? And then we are going to leave all the default settings. So this is, as you can see, very straightforward. Now once you have created this repository, you just have to select it and then see view push commands, right? So in the push command there are 4 steps that you have to follow. The first step is to authenticate your AWS CLI, because we are going to use AWS CLI to push our Docker image. So we have to log in first using AWS CLI into our AWS account, right? So this is the first step, and once that is done, we can build our Docker image, and then we can, the next step is to tag it, and the last step is to push it to the ECR, right? So let's follow this step by step. So I'm going to just copy the first one and then I'll go and paste it here, and we are going to see if the login succeeds. Okay, so it says login succeeded. The next step is to build a Docker image, right? So I just need to clear something here. Basically the architecture behind my system is ARM64, but the container where our Docker image will be running will be a AMD 64 architecture. So we have to basically build it for AMD 64 architecture, and that's why we need to change this command a little bit. Let's see how. So we are going to just paste it here. Now we are going to add an option here, platform Linux AMD 64, and then we are going to build it. Okay, it's done. Now we are going to use the third option, that is the tag option, so we can push the image to this repository. So it is important that we tag, otherwise the image won't be pushed, right? So let's paste it here. It's very straightforward, and the last step is to copy the push command and paste it here so that it will push the image. So this might take up to 30 seconds, so we just have to wait, and once it's done we can go here and see that we have an image here, right, which was uploaded right now. Now the next step is to uh, update our security group. Why? Because our container will be running on 8000 port, and so we have to add it in order to allow traffic from outside on port 8000, right? So let's look for the default security group and then make that change. So we are just going to go to security groups, and okay, so we have this default security group. Let's open it, and okay, so we have to ensure that 8000 is added here. It looks like it is, I have already added it, but if you want to add it, you can just click on edit inbound rules, which is the incoming requests, and then you can just add a rule, and you can select 00 here, and you can add 8000 here, right? So for now, since we already have it, I'm going to delete this, so we can just cancel and go back. Okay, now we are done with creating a ECR, pushing our Docker container image to ECR, and updating the security group inbound rules. Now let's create an ECS which will be used to orchestrate our containers, right? So first we need to understand what orchestration is. I am going to just tell you in one sentence what orchestration is. It is basically used to deploy multiple instances of your application. And why is this important? Especially for companies or startups which are scaling up very fast. So since there are a lot of requests, most likely one container won't be able to handle it, and since we can't do it manually all the time, ECS takes care of it basically, right? So it orchestrates, and it decides most of the time automatically how many tasks are needed and how many tasks need to be deployed at a time according to the incoming number of requests. Okay, so let's create a cluster. Basically its name is elastic container service, right? And so we have to create a cluster is basically a bunch of services for your system. Maybe there are multiple microservices that you need to run. All those things are run inside a cluster. So let's create one. We are just going to name it hello dog, right? And the default namespace we can just leave it like that. Now we are going to select AWS Fargate because it is very straightforward and it is pay as you go. So basically it is very cheap compared to EC2 instances. Now we are going to leave all the default settings here as they are, and we are just going to click on create. Okay, so the creation is in progress, it says, and it might take a few minutes to get it up and running. We can just go and view it in CloudFormation, and I'll be back once it's done. So it's up and running now. The next thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a task definition. So the task definition is basically the resources and the security groups and all the configuration that we are going to need to run our Docker image. We are going to specify in a task definition. So task definition is like a definition of a class in Python, right? Where you define attributes and some functions, and that is just a blueprint, and then you create an object for a class which is an instance of the class. Same way, task definition is a blueprint of a task, and the task is basically the container that is deployed. So we are just going to define the blueprint, and then once we start a service, that will create a task based on the definition that we are going to provide here, right? Okay, so let's create a task definition. So we are going to task definitions here, and we are going to click on create new task definition, and we are just going to name it something like hello doc family, and we are going to leave everything else as it is. And now we have to create a container is basically where our docker image will be deployed. So let's name it hello doc container, and then we are going to select the repo. Now what is repo, you ask? We have to go here and we have to look at this carefully. So if you look at this, you will see that it says docker push and then this whole thing. So it clearly looks like this is our repo, right? So we are just going to copy this and we are going to paste it here, right? And we are going to leave everything else as it is. Okay, here it says port mapping, so we can add 8000, and then we can say http read only root file system, and we are going to leave everything else as it is, and we are going to click create. Alright, so we have successfully created a task definition. Okay, so the next thing is that we are going to create a service inside a cluster, and service is basically how we deploy the docker image from ECR to the cluster, right? If we start a service, that means we are triggering a deployment of some tasks, and we can define how many tasks we need at the moment. So let's go and create a service. Okay, so we are going to keep most of the values as they are, and we are going to say service here, and then we are going to select a task definition. We have a task definition that we created. We are just going to select that, and then we are going to name the service something hello docker service, and then we are going to uh, define the desired tasks. Now since this is just for a demo purpose, we are just going to keep the desired tasks as one, and we are going to leave everything else as it is, and we are going to create it. And once we click on create, it will start the deployment process. So it says hello docker service deployment is in progress. That means it is going to create a task, since we mentioned that we need one task. So we are just going to keep checking it here. So it might take a few minutes to deploy the service, so we are just going to check it in cloud formation, and it says this creation is complete, but the service deployment is in progress. So if we refresh it, we are going to see it, and we can also check out the tasks here. Okay, so we have a new task created here, and that means our deployment was successful. Now if we click here, we can check logs and see, okay, this means it was successfully deployed, because the same log message we saw on our local as well, right? So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to pick up this public IP, which is how we are going to hit our health check endpoint to see if everything is running correctly. We are just going to go here, and since it's running on 8000 and we have done port binding, so we are just going to add the port, and then we are going to do health check, right? So let's click and check it. Okay, so you can see it says the service is up and running, which is what we had seen on the local. Okay, so we have successfully deployed a docker container image from our local to ECS. Of course it was manual, but that is what we are going to automate in the last part of the video, where we'll be integrating GitHub actions, so that whenever we push a change in our main branch of the GitHub repo, it will automatically trigger a service deployment in ECS, and that's how we are going to complete our CI/CD pipeline. So stay tuned, and hope you enjoyed this video and got to learn a lot. See you in the next video. Bye.